Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I'm here today with Katie with FluffyButt Farms, and she's representing her state of Massachusetts today in this homesteading interview. Welcome, Katie, and thank you for joining me.
Good morning.
Good morning. Would you like to share with the audience where they can find you on social media?
Sure. So you can find us on Facebook at FluffyButt Farm, Eggs and Education. And then you can also find us on Instagram at FluffyButt Farm Design.
Great. Okay, if you would share a little bit about yourself, your family, and where you're currently living.
Yeah, sure. So we are on the beautiful Cape Cod in New England. So it's Cape Cod, Massachusetts. We actually live in a little town called Forestdale. It's right outside of a town called Sandwich. It's all a little bit of one. I like to say that we live in Forestdale, but we pay our taxes to Sandwich, which is fun when you need to call the police department because you get the Sandwich police. So it's really awesome living here. The weather is great. We have beaches right down the road. We have some great agriculture. So we moved here because my husband is active duty Air Force, and there's a small military base here. He came from overseas, and we were able to connect back as a family here. And we restarted our farm after he came back from being overseas. So that was fun. And then also we just recently had our first child. We have a beautiful baby girl named Samantha who's 6 months old. This is where we are now.
Very nice. Okay. Share a little bit about your growing zone, what kind of gardening methods you use, and what's your soil like out there?
Oh man, that depends on exactly where you live on the Cape. So the closer you are to the beach, the more sandy, more loamy it gets. We also have a pretty difficult growing situation here because there was a little bit of a soil contamination problem back in the 70s. So that tends to be a little bit of an issue, but most of that is completely gone away. You can't really find any remnants of it. But we're on the edge of 6A, where we actually live. If you look at the map, our town is directly on the edge of the 6B, 7A growing zone. But if you go just 10 miles in the other direction, you hit 6A, and just 10 miles again, you'll go back a little bit further. And even on the western side of Massachusetts, you get all the way down to zone 5. So the growing season here really drastically depends on what you want to grow and when you want to grow it and how. And I know that sounds a little funny because obviously that's the way it is everywhere. But it's so specific here. And one of the reasons for that is because the Cape itself is an island. It's a man-made island where we had the canal built, I think it's late 1800s, early 1900s. And what ended up happening is now as we have weather that comes across the United States, the further east it goes, it just changes when it hits the water. So, a lot of people know when you live on the opposite side of a mountain range or anything like that, how it'll change your weather. So while we do have great soil here, and we do have a great landscape for agriculture, we don't have a whole lot of like rocky material and whatnot. We do have quite a few challenges with the weather.
Okay, so what are you growing?
So we have berries. We have lots and lots of berries. We have blackberries and blueberries and strawberries. And we do, depending on where we live, as being a military family, we do move quite often. And so depending on where we live depends on how we change what we grow and how we adapt to the new area. With this area, we do a lot of berries because we have a lot of poultry. So as we have the poultry, you can assume that they are quite often eating the crops that you grow. So when we used to do a lot of squash and tomatoes and things like that, the poultry have now decided that that is their snack. So the blueberries grow amazingly here. Of course, everybody's heard of wild Maine blueberries. Maine blueberries don't necessarily come from Maine. It's a certain type of blueberry bush. It's called a low bush, and they're grown very, very close to the ground. Of course, everyone knows that cranberries also come from this area, which are kind of grown the same way. They're very, very low to the ground. And so you can get any of these bushes that will grow very, very well. I mean, we have blueberry bushes that are 6-7 feet tall, which make great for picking because you're not having to bend over. But yeah, we have blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. We'll do some strawberries in the spring, but we do have a little bit of a rabbit issue, so we lose a lot of the strawberries.
Okay. So I would imagine, so that's one of your challenges is the weather and then the rabbits.
Yes, the weather and not just the rabbits. We have a lot of predators here on the Cape when it comes to gardens and small animals because we have we have an imbalance of predators here. So while we have a lot of coyote and we have a lot of fox and then also small animals like rabbits and gophers and mice and things like that, what we don't have are bobcats, mountain lions, bear to offset that issue. So a little side note on that, we do have a huge problem with barn cats going missing. So, you kind of, you adapt to what you have going on.
So will you be putting in a traditional garden this year or no?
This year, I would like to say yes. But what I'm finding is as a new mom, I just don't have as much time as I did before.
Understood.
And so we may just stick with what we have. And another reason for that is because the military will probably be moving us next year. So I don't want to you have to find enough time, right? I don't want to put so much time and effort into a traditional garden like we had 2 seasons ago, because of course I was pregnant last year, just to get a little bit of veggies out of it for the spring and then move away.
Understood. So what type of animals do you have?
It's a great question. So we have chicken, duck, turkey, and then 2 types of quail. We have Coturnix quail and we also have button quail, more commonly known as king quail.
Okay. And then what kind of ducks do you have?
We have khaki Campbells. Well, we have khaki Campbell hybrids. A lot of hatcheries will call these golden layers or 300 layers. They are fantastic birds for laying. They lay pretty much throughout the year. They really are just very, very hardy layers. Khaki Campbells themselves are, but these guys are hybrids. Then we also have cayugas, which are the beautiful black, solid colored ducks. They have black feet, they have black bills. Their feathers are so black that they're almost iridescent green. And then we also have a couple of blue Swedish, absolutely beautiful ducks. And as far as chickens go, we have pretty much everything you could think of. We have Cochins, we have Langchans, we have Wyandottes. I mean, everything, honestly. We have one Silky. I don't know how she's still here. I think she's like 10 years old. It's ridiculous. Showgirls. So we have, and we even have some of the itty bitty Saramas. We have 5 little Saramas that we rescued, and they are just the cutest little things.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about quail care and everything quail, but before we do that, let's talk about, you mentioned that you go to the farmer's market and you sell some of your product. What exactly are you selling at the farmer's market?
So the majority of what we sell is going to be chicken eggs. We have lots and lots of chicken eggs. People really like the way that we raise our birds, and they also like what we feed them. It really helps in having a good product. So we do whole foods and local grained feed. So we do a lot of the chicken eggs, and then our next most popular product is the duck eggs. We do sell some turkey eggs at the farmer's market for eating. That's kind of a delicacy for people who have never had them before. They taste a lot like duck eggs, or just a little bigger. And then quail eggs. And then in the early part of June, the strawberries will come in, and then blueberries is kind of our huge actually berry crop. So we'll do anywhere from a few 100 pounds to even close to 1,000 pounds of blueberries a year. So those come in July, and then a little bit later, a couple weeks after that, sometime in late July or August, the blackberries and loganberries will start coming in.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about quail. What are the benefits, first of all, of having quail?
That's a great question. I love raising the quail. So because they're so small, they take up so little space. They do fly, so you have to have a fly pen, but that's not very difficult to do. You can use chicken wire or bird netting, or you can go with the much more sturdy. So the quail, they're great for the Coturnix quail. They're amazing for meat and eggs both. So if you don't have very much space, you can keep a lot of the quail. We're talking about a bird that may not work out very well, but about yay big, size of a large coffee cup. And so you can easily raise 20 or 30 of these in an area that's 10 by 10, and they have plenty of space. They won't tear up the yard. And like I said, you can keep them in a small kind of like chain link fly pin area, and you can use them strictly for eggs if you'd like to, or if you get into a little bit more of a routine with it, you can raise them for meat also. And it's a very sustainable way to raise your own meat, a very easy way to feed your family as far as eggs and meat both. So it takes approximately three Coturnix eggs to equal the size of one large chicken egg, which would be your standard egg that you would buy at the store, use for your baking and cooking. And then one quail typically is enough to feed an adult person. So if you're raising 200 quail at a time, which you could do you could still do that in a 10 by 10 area and have plenty of space. You could feed a whole family for 6 months on strictly just the quail and eggs alone. And it would take you approximately 9 weeks to get to that point. So it's a very quick turnaround. It also they have a very low food conversion rate, food conversion rate. So it doesn't take very much feed to get them to the point where you would be able to use them in an egg laying capacity or a meat capacity.
Okay, very good. So let's take me from the beginning to the end. What does that whole process look like?
For a meat bird?
Yeah, for the quail.
So if we were to process the quail for meat, so Massachusetts is a little weird it's not weird, it's just obviously there's regulations for that.
Well, let's just not even say for market. Let's just say for yourself.
The quail go from the day you put the eggs in the incubator, you're looking at exactly 18 days for them to hatch. So they'll start hatching around 16 days. Most of them will be hatched out by the end of day 18. So 3 weeks. You have 3 weeks from going in the incubator to hatching. And then depending on your line of quail, you could butcher them anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. If you let them go past 8 weeks, they're not growing anymore. So they're just kind of taking up space and eating your feed. So at 6 weeks, you can start butchering them. Okay. And the process as far as butchering it's the same as it would be for any other bird. It's just much, much smaller. So it's very easy to do inside your kitchen or just right in the front yard, and you have very little waste. So the way that we do it is we have a regular 5-gallon bucket, and we have some just little clips, I don't know what you'd call them, alligator clips or whatnot. And we use a pair of shears to remove the head, and then we clip them upside down in the bucket, and we give them just a minute or so to drain because they're so small, it does not take any time at all. And then we have a Wright Farm plucker. I love this plucker. It was a couple $100, but it makes very quick work of actually plucking the birds. So you put one in the plucker, and you use a garden hose to wash all the feathers away. And the bird comes out, you remove the legs, and you go in and just remove the insides. And at that point, you can either let them brine in the refrigerator for a couple of days, or you can immediately put them into the freezer. So I like to vacuum seal them in a package, since it's my husband and I. And then when we're ready to eat, we just pull them out and unthaw them, stick them, you cook them any way you want to. So it's a very quick process. I'd say we can process about 150 birds in 2 hours. 150 birds will feed us for, if we're not eating quail every day, you're talking about being able to go, 150 days really. So every other day, it's a great way to go. And you can utilize the whole bird just like you would with a chicken. So you can use them for stock after you've eaten the meat off the bird, or there's just so many different things that you can do with them. You can think of them as tiny chickens. That's kind of the way to go about it. Very, very sustainable. And there's a lot of really good things about having them also, as far as being able to use their waste as compost. You can use the internal parts of them for different types of food. A lot of people like to use the organs, of course. If you don't want to use the organs yourself, you can use them as raw dog food. There's just a lot of different options about having it. So it's a great alternative to raising large fowl birds, as far as, if you wanted to do meat chickens or you wanted to do meat turkey. You'd need a much bigger space to do those. And typically with chickens, say for instance, if my husband and I, we wanted to raise chickens, we would take a chicken out of the freezer. Well, first of all, you have to have much more freezer space. So you don't want to really waste, it's not a waste of your time, but you don't want to end up doing, for instance, like 5 or 10 chickens. You could do 200 quail in the same space that you could do 5 to 10 chickens. And then you end up with more options as far as how you would cook your meat, instead of, for two people having one chicken for dinner and then having to eat the leftovers for 3 or 4 days. So I know that was a lot of information at one time, but there are so many benefits to raising quail. And the other huge benefit about raising quail is that in a lot of the locations where you're not allowed to have poultry, the towns have specifically made regulations that say no chickens or no ducks, or you have to get licenses for them. Most of these jurisdictions do not restrict the raising of quail. So quail would be considered more of a pet bird like a parrot or cockatiel would be. And there's either no licensing or it's very easy to get. So you could raise them in a very, very small area or even inside.
Okay. Let's switch it up a little bit. Let's talk about your practice of bartering and how that's affected or impacted or benefited your farm.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I never really thought about it. It just kind of happened. So, I grew up watching my grandfather with his farm and everything. And, he would have the bee guy put bees in his garden and then he would get honey out of it, but it was benefiting both of them. Just a lot of things like that. So as I grew as a person and started making friends and, essentially close friends to the point of family, you started doing things where I would have extra eggs, so I would take them to my neighbor, and my neighbor would say, well, hey, I have tomatoes, and then you switch. So now it's a very common practice. A lot of people that do farmers markets know exactly what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, you have product left over, and I don't grow tomatoes here, so I would like some tomatoes. I switch with the guy over there, or even just giving something to someone who needs it or could use it, and then next time that they're around, they have something that you can use. So it really benefits yourself and the other farmers to help each other out. So instead of everyone having to sustain a full variety of foods to sustain their household, you can have one person who focuses on one or two things and another person that focuses on one or two things, and they're very good at what they do, and then they benefit each other. So it's a really great way to go. I think as a community and as a society as a whole, we've gotten away from that. So we've done a lot of different things like that, even all the way down to our compost. So I do not need as much compost as I produce, so we'll load it up in the early spring, and we'll take it to some of the farmers that grow plants, and they love it. They just absolutely love it. And then
That's
spring,
awesome.
their plants
It's a
come
great
up.
practice. It's a great practice.
Yeah.
Yep. So speaking of practices, let's talk about sustainability. That is a sustainable practice. Bartering. But what other things do you do at the farm and in your household that would be considered sustainable practices?
Great. So outside of, I wouldn't necessarily call it outside of the farm, but in our home, particularly having a small child, some of the things that we do with her, we do like cloth diapering. I feel like that really benefits us and also her, along with the environment. And then we do other things like we have solar panels that really helps with our energy consumption, and as far as keeping our bills down too, that's a great alternative. We have well water, and with the birds. So for instance, like when we incubate our birds, we try to get the mothers to the moms that didn't hatch eggs. We try to get them to raise the babies so that we don't have to use a lot of lights and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do alternatively that impact the your pull from the grid and things that would consume things that are not sustainable and reusable a lot. So we try to compost everything that we can. Another big one that we use is the green waste. So we use green waste to feed our birds. So as far as the things that are not usable from the grocery store, we have a contract with them to be able to bring those items home. We have to go through them, of course, make sure that they're not moldy. We have to remove the stickers and things like that. And then that's part of what the birds get to eat.
Yeah. So how did you get that contract?
I just asked. I know it seems pretty weird to do that, especially with the younger generation. People just don't ask anymore. But when we moved here, I knew that was something I really wanted to push for, because I know that it leads to healthier birds. If you have birds that can have fresh grass and grains and vegetables and things like that, it really helps with everything. Honestly, it makes a healthier bird. Just like we're healthier when we eat fruits and vegetables, so are they. So I went to the local grocery store right after we moved here, and I just talked to the produce manager, and he said, hey, you know what? We actually just had a program go into place here in the state, and let me check on it. So here in Massachusetts, we have the Department of Environmental Protection. And one of the things that they did, I think it was in 2014, was they put a law into place that any company that has over a 1 ton of waste a week has to find alternatives for their waste. It cannot just go into a landfill. So one of the things that means is that the grocery stores who a banana that gets broken, or a watermelon that's cracked, or tomatoes that have bruises, or the packages of lettuce that expire, it's not that those foods are bad, it's just that they are not desirable anymore. And instead of leaving them on the shelf, they remove them. And the first thing that they do is they mark them down. So the things that have dates on them have to be removed from the shelf according to the laws. But, tomatoes that have bruises and whatnot, a lot of times they try to mark those down and try to get the public to buy them, but they still don't. So they end up going in the bin. And we got the contract. We, had to go through the process, liabilities and insurances and whatnot. And now every single night, which may be a little daunting, my husband and I, or one of us, will make the trip down to the store, and we take our bins and we just go through, and we try there to go ahead and remove the plastics and everything. But sometimes we bring them home, and then we just make sure everything's good to eat. It goes in the back room. We have to make sure it's up off the floor. We don't have any issues as far as rodents and whatnot getting into it. And then the next morning, that's what the birds get for breakfast. And they absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
That's a great practice to have in your state. All that stuff that's not going into the landfill. I'm glad to see that.
It is. It's really good. And another part of that is a lot of these places will donate a lot of that food to the local food pantries. So it's benefiting the community in multiple ways, not only just farmers and our animals, but also people who need a little bit of blessing in their life. So you'll find a lot of the places are donating. For instance, Trader Joe's here. We have a Trader Joe's. They donate every single thing that comes off their shelf to a local food pantry that I volunteer at. And it's awesome to see how much stuff that actually goes in. Breads and, it just everything, absolutely everything.
So with that being said, that you volunteer at the food bank, how has that changed your thought process about what the food situation is here in the United States?
So I started volunteering at the food pantry because I had just moved here and I had nothing else to do. I didn't realize just how big of an impact it would have on myself and then also our community. So there's a lot of waste in our world, a lot of waste, very just one-time use type things, or just it's not pretty, I don't want it type issues. And in the agriculture community, when you produce a lot of fruits and vegetables, you'll have grading systems, 1s, 2s, 3s. And depending on how pretty an item is, depends on where it goes. So if something is not pretty enough, it won't even get put in the truck to get sent to the grocery store. And to me, that's absolutely ridiculous because it's still edible. So what I found at the food pantry and at the service center is that a lot of these items, people are so grateful. They need the help. For whatever reason, people come into facilities like that. You see people who literally, they don't care. You don't care whether or not your watermelon has a crack in it or has a scar down the side or the tomato has a bruise. The food is food. And it's just absolutely ridiculous to me that we have as much as 40 and 50% of the food that's produced in this country is wasted. Literally 40 or 50%. People outside of the agriculture community do not realize that it's literally 40 and 50%. And if you start thinking about if we could start utilizing those items before they end up being labeled as waste, what that would do as far as supporting our farmers and supporting our agriculture business, and maybe some of these long-time farms that have been around for 100 years, won't end up shutting down. But as far as going back to the service center, it's really nice to see that some of these stores have really taken it to heart as far as being able to provide this to the local community and helping these families and individuals that need the assistance. It's really awesome to see, because we can reach more people without having to actually buy these items or using the Greater Boston Food Pantry, which is fine. You know, Greater Boston Food Pantry, they distribute to the local communities, and it's an awesome thing that they provide. But it's just a shame to see our agriculture at the state that it's in, and a lot of it just has to do with the fact that as a society we are so hell-bent on seeing perfect food, and I don't know how that happened. I honestly don't know how it happened. My grandmother was never like that, so
it happened because of overabundance.
That's very good. Yeah,
That's what I would say.
So distant from where their food comes from now that they don't even understand. Like, for instance, strawberries. Pretty much every single strawberry you get comes from California. When we lived in California, I had some of the best strawberries of my life, because you pick them right off the vine the second they should be eaten, instead of long before they're fully ripe and then being shipped across the country. But if you stop and you look at your strawberry package, pretty much anywhere in the United States, it says California. But what ends up happening is people don't know that. They don't know, like here in Massachusetts, they don't know that their strawberries don't come from a farmer in Massachusetts. They don't know that. They don't know that avocados come from Mexico. They don't know that pineapples come from Hawaii. They just don't know. I remember seeing this picture of pineapples growing. If you've never seen a pineapple the way it grows, Google it. And I looked at the picture and I went, that's not a pineapple. That can't be a pineapple. But pineapples grow individually on plants. When you get a pineapple, one plant grew you one pineapple. And I thought to myself, no wonder pineapples are so expensive. Mm-hmm. But that happens all the time. Like asparagus, it grows out of the ground, one stalk at a time. Brussels sprouts, they grow on a stalk. It looks like a little musical instrument. And people, they just have no clue. So you end up having people who say, I had no idea. Or they even worse say, well, why don't you just get it from the grocery store? And I'm unfortunately talked to this young lady the other day who had said something along the lines of, well, I don't understand why the farmers are having such a big deal. You can just go to the grocery store and buy it. Well, not if the farmers can't plant what they need to plant. It's not going to get to the grocery store. And it just kind of blew her mind that if the farmers can't plant, or their fields get flooded, or there's not enough water in California, then we don't get strawberries here. So it was...
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of education regarding where our food comes from. So definitely. Speaking of that, let's talk about the type of education that you do in your community.
Yeah, so I love to work with children. I would love to do more with the children in our community. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that people are so either miseducated or have just gotten so far away from it. As much as I would love to say that I grew up on a farm and every single morning I was out doing the chores, it just isn't true. My father was a contractor, and God love him, he moved us all over the country. And so I never had the opportunity growing up to do what I like to do. My mother always had a small garden. And then in the summers, we would go back and visit my grandfather and grandmother, who had this large open space. At one point we had, I think there was maybe a couple 100 acres, and we had pecans and just everything. And then as he got older, it got a little smaller, but I learned so much from him that I love to share. So we do a lot of things with the 4-H. We even do things with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. We go into some of the local schools and we do talks and different educational things with them. And then we work with individuals also. So one of the things that I really like to do is when people come to me and they say, hey, I would really like to do this, or I'd really like to do that. How do I get set up? I will go to their house and work with people. So one of my really good friends actually messaged me this morning and said, I think I really want to get set up with some quail. I'd love to have like 4 or 5 of them just to get some eggs. And so I was chatting with her just this morning about the different types of wires she needs to use and how to keep them predator safe and things like that. So you'd rather someone be educated on what they're doing before they get started than see some of these really horrible mistakes. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really, really like working with the 4-H programs here, because those are kids that they specifically join the 4-H program to learn things like this, and they're really excited to start seeing things. I would love to see the Cape have more of an FFA program, but we really just don't have that up here. But we have seen some of the local schools start branching off and doing their own thing. So we're actually working with one of the local high schools on starting their own poultry program. And they have the woodworking class. They're going to be working on a coop. So we're going to go in and talk to them about dimensions and sizes and what they need and the type of wood they should use. And then they're applying for grants to get the fencing. And then ultimately, I think what's going to end up happening is when we end up transferring at the end of this season, we'll probably end up donating the rest of our chickens that are not going with us to that program. So it's going to be an all-around good thing. And I'm glad that we'll be able to make a little bit of an impact here before we move on to our next duty station. And then when we get there, we'll start the whole process over again.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for doing that. A person can make an impact in their community, whether it's large or small. So thank you for doing that. That's wonderful. So we're getting ready to wrap up. Let's just, one thing. If you can sum up your homesteading experience in one word, what would that word be?
You know, I thought long and hard about this question, and the one thing that I came back to every single time was family. So I started this because of my family. My grandfather taught me pretty much everything I knew before he passed away. I do this now because of my family. I like to have whole, healthy food. And then in a greater sense, I really feel like I have a family, a greater family, because of what I do. So the people at the farmers market, the people at the Falmouth Service Center, which is the food pantry that we volunteer at, because of being a military family, our biological family is very far away. My father is in South Carolina, my mother's in Texas, my husband's family is also very far away. And going back to having our first child, I cannot tell you how many people have supported us along the way. And if you ever want to find out who really cares about you and who you would really consider family, I highly recommend deciding to bring a child into your life. So, you know, food is the very basis of what we live on. If we don't have food, we can't live. And sharing food with people is one of the most important things I think that you can do, because you can learn so much about a person, or just being there for each other around food. And that's pretty much what homesteading comes down to, is just supporting yourself and supporting your family. So there you go. I don't think I could say it enough.
Very well said. Katie, thank you for participating in this interview, and thank you for being such a good steward in your neighborhood and your community.
Thank you so much. You
really have inspired me, really, to go out and do more in the community. So
thank you
again, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.